July 2022. Chelsea Commodore walks into a New York federal courthouse and files a class action lawsuit that would blow up the biggest greenwashing scam in fashion history. According to the lawsuit, H&M's created illusion that old clothes are simply turned into new garments or that clothes will not end up in a landfill is misleading, adding that recycling solutions either do not exist or are not commercially available at scale for the vast majority of H&M's products. But wait, it gets worse. Those environmental scores on H&M's website? Completely fake. The recycled materials, less sustainable than their regular clothes. The company that claimed to be leading the green revolution was actually more wasteful than before. Now, H&M wasn't alone. Every major fast fashion brand was pulling the same con. They convinced us that buying more clothes was the solution to buying too much. So, when the lawsuits started flying and the scam got exposed, did we stop shopping? Hell no! We just stopped pretending to care about the planet while we did it. This is the story of how an entire industry convinced the world that shopping more was the solution to shopping too much, and why that scam just collapsed. Back in the 2000s, fast fashion was having its moment. Zara was dropping new collections every 2 weeks. H&M was making runway looks accessible for the price of a coffee shop lunch. Forever 21 was turning shopping into a sport, where the goal was to buy as much as possible for as little as possible. It was beautiful, chaotic, and absolutely devastating to the planet. By 2010, the fashion industry was producing 100 billion garments annually, double what it made in 2000. Textile production was consuming more water than entire countries. Fashion weeks became environmental disasters disguised as cultural events. Then something shifted. The 2013 Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh killed over 1,100 garment workers. And suddenly, everyone started asking uncomfortable questions. Documentaries like The True Cost began exposing the real price of that $5 t-shirt. Social media activists started posting before and after photos of polluted rivers in textile manufacturing regions. Fast fashion had an image problem, and image problems cost money. Stock prices started reflecting environmental concerns. ESG, environmental, social, and governance scores, became the new credit ratings that investors actually cared about. Companies realized that they had two choices: completely overhaul their business model or completely overhaul their marketing strategy. Guess which one they chose? The solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Don't change what you make, change what you call it. Don't reduce production, rebrand it. Don't slow it down, just add the word conscious to everything and watch the magic happen. Enter the Eco Collection, the fashion industry's greatest magic trick. H&M launched their Conscious collection in 2012. Zara followed with their Join Life line. Every major retailer suddenly had a sustainable corner of their store, complete with earth tone packaging and labels covered in leaves and recycling symbols. But it gets interesting. When you dug deeper into these collections, and almost nobody did, the sustainability claims were impressively vague. Made with recycled materials could mean anything from 5% to 50% recycled content. Sustainably sourced had no standardized definition. Eco-friendly process was essentially marketing poetry with no measurable meaning. H&M became the poster child for this approach, and their strategy was masterful. They started ranking themselves as one of the most transparent fashion companies in various sustainability indices. They published detailed reports about their environmental goals. Then they hired sustainability officers and created entire departments dedicated to green initiatives. Meanwhile, they were still the second largest clothing retailer in the world, producing billions of garments annually and encouraging customers to buy more, not less. The conscious collection represented less than 5% of their total inventory, but it generated about 80% of their positive press coverage. The economics here were fascinating. Customers were willing to pay a 15 to 30% premium for items labeled as sustainable. This green premium meant that eco-collections often had higher profit margins than regular lines, even though the actual environmental impact was marginal at best. Companies were literally being rewarded financially for greenwashing. The most beautiful part of the scam is that it was self-reinforcing. The more companies invested in sustainable marketing, the more consumers believed sustainable fashion was real. The more consumers believed it was real, the more they were willing to pay premium prices. The more they paid premium prices, the more companies invested in sustainable marketing. It was a perfect feedback loop, with one tiny flaw. None of it was actually sustainable. Social media turned sustainable fashion from a marketing tactic into a lifestyle brand. Instagram became ground zero for what we might call ethical aesthetics, the art of looking morally superior while consuming at unprecedented levels. Fashion influencers discovered they could have their cake and eat it too. They could continue promoting constant consumption, their bread and butter, while simultaneously positioning themselves as environmentally conscious. The magic phrase became sustainable haul, which, when you think about it, is like saying healthy binge eating or responsible gambling addiction. These hauls were spectacular to watch. Influencers would unbox dozens of items from sustainable brands, explaining how each purchase was actually an act of environmental activism. "I'm supporting ethical manufacturing," they'd say, while showcasing their 15th pair of eco-friendly jeans. "This brand plants a tree for every purchase," they'd add, ignoring the fact that producing and shipping those jeans probably generated more carbon emissions than a small tree could offset in its entire lifetime. The brands loved this because influencers were essentially providing free market research and focus group feedback. Every sustainable haul video was data about what messaging worked, what price points consumers would accept, and how to make overconsumption feel virtuous. Let me tell you, the economic psychology was brilliant. Traditional luxury marketing had always been about exclusivity and status. But sustainable fashion marketing tapped into something even more powerful: moral superiority. Wearing a $200 ethically made dress didn't just make you look good, it made you feel like a better person than everyone else in the room. The irony reached peak levels when fast fashion brands started sponsoring influencers to promote conscious consumption, while literally encouraging their followers to buy more products. It was like tobacco companies sponsoring health influencers to promote mindful smoking. This very illusion ran so deep when sustainable fashion became seasonal. Yes, guys, brands started releasing new sustainable collections every season, encouraging customers to refresh their ethical wardrobes regularly. The cognitive dissonance was stunning, but it worked because people wanted it to work. Like all good scams, sustainable fashion's downfall began when someone started asking for receipts. Around 2020, investigative journalists and environmental watchdogs began doing something revolutionary: actually checking the claims. The Norwegian Consumer Authority became the unlikely hero of this story when they launched investigations into H&M's marketing practices. Their findings were devastating. H&M was using terms like conscious choice and sustainable without any factual basis. The authority fined them and forced them to remove misleading marketing materials. Bente Overly, deputy director of Norway's Consumer Authority, called out H&M for greenwashing, saying, "As H&M are not giving the consumer precise information about why these clothes are labeled conscious, we conclude that consumers are being given the impression that these products are more sustainable than they actually are." Similar investigations started popping up across Europe and North America. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority began scrutinizing green claims across the fashion industry. The Federal Trade Commission in the US started issuing warnings about environmental marketing fraud. But the real turning point came when third-party organizations began conducting life cycle assessments of so-called sustainable fashion lines. The results were shocking. Many eco-friendly garments had carbon footprints nearly identical to conventional fashion items. Some were actually worse for the environment due to more complex manufacturing processes required for recycled materials. The Higg Index, a tool used to measure environmental impact in fashion, became a weapon against greenwashing when independent researchers started using it to fact-check brand claims. Companies that had been promoting their green credentials for years suddenly found themselves exposed as environmental laggards. The regulatory pressure created a new kind of business risk here. Companies that had built their brand identity around sustainability claims suddenly faced potential lawsuits, fines, and regulatory scrutiny. Legal departments started advising marketing teams to tone down environmental claims. The cost of maintaining the sustainable fashion facade was becoming higher than the profits it generated. Don't go anywhere, because the story takes its most cynical turn. Despite all the exposés, investigations, and mounting evidence of greenwashing, something fascinating happened. Absolutely nothing. Consumer behavior barely changed. Fast fashion sales continued growing. Shein, the most environmentally problematic fast fashion brand in history, became the most downloaded shopping app globally. The same consumers who shared infographics about fashion industry pollution were ordering $3 crop tops that would fall apart after 3 washes. The disconnect was unbelievable. Surveys showed that 73% of consumers claimed they would pay more for sustainable fashion. Yet sustainable fashion brands consistently struggled to gain market share against ultra-fast fashion competitors. The data revealed a harsh truth. People cared about sustainability when it was convenient, cheap, and didn't require any actual sacrifice. Social media provided the perfect window into this hypocrisy. The same influencers who had built their brands on sustainable fashion were quietly pivoting back to regular hauls. The boycott Shein hashtag would trend on Twitter while Shein's sales figures reached record highs. People were performing environmental consciousness online while practicing environmental destruction offline. When faced with a choice between a $50 sustainable dress and a $15 equivalent from a fast fashion brand, sustainability lost almost every time. Price sensitivity trumped environmental consciousness, especially among younger consumers who had been the primary target of sustainable fashion marketing. Perhaps most tellingly, the resale market, which should have thrived if people truly cared about sustainability, remained a tiny fraction of overall fashion sales. If consumers genuinely wanted to reduce fashion waste, they would have embraced secondhand shopping. Instead, they embraced the idea of caring about fashion waste while continuing to buy new items at unprecedented rates. The sustainable fashion industry had successfully created a market for feeling good about consumption, but they had failed to create a market for actual sustainable consumption. By 2023 and 2024, the sustainable fashion party was officially over. Major retailers began quietly scaling back their eco collections. H&M's conscious collections started shrinking. Marketing budgets shifted away from sustainability messaging toward price-focused advertising. Companies that had spent millions building their sustainable fashion credentials simply stopped talking about it. Press releases started emphasizing value and accessibility instead of environmental responsibility. Sustainability officers found themselves reassigned or laid off entirely. The language itself evolved. Sustainable fashion became accessible fashion. Conscious consumption became smart shopping. Ethical manufacturing became quality products at great prices. It was like watching an entire industry collectively decline and pretend the last decade hadn't happened. The financial logic was pretty clear. Maintaining the sustainable fashion narrative required constant investment in better materials, more transparent supply chains, and higher production standards. But the market had proven that consumers weren't actually willing to pay for those improvements. Companies again faced a choice: continue losing money on sustainability initiatives, or abandon them and return to competing purely on price. Most chose price. The ones that didn't found themselves struggling to compete against ultra-fast fashion brands that had never pretended to care about sustainability in the first place. The regulatory crackdown that was supposed to force real change instead just forced companies to stop making claims they couldn't substantiate. Rather than improving their practices, many simply stopped talking about their practices altogether. We're witnessing the quiet death of sustainable fashion as a consumer movement. Looking back, it's almost impressive how completely the industry managed to convince us that buying more stuff was somehow good for the environment. The sustainable fashion era taught us something valuable about modern consumer culture. We desperately want to believe that our purchasing decisions can save the world. We want to believe that the right brands, the right products, and the right lifestyle choices can solve complex global problems without requiring any real sacrifice from us. But perhaps the most honest question we can ask isn't whether sustainable fashion was ever real, it's whether we ever really wanted it to be real. Because if we truly prioritized environmental responsibility over convenience and price, the market would have responded differently. The fashion industry gave us exactly what we asked for: the feeling of being environmentally conscious without the inconvenience of actually changing our behavior. They sold us a story where we could be both sustainable and stylish, both ethical and trendy, both environmentally responsible and constantly consuming. And we bought it, literally and figuratively, because it was exactly what we wanted to hear. The real question isn't whether sustainable fashion was ever sustainable. The real question is, if caring about the environment was just a branding tactic, were we ever really caring about the environment at all?